emergency.
Yeah.
Meeting. I thought I just mentioned that.
You just carry around a cart outside of town.
Been chairing meetings and all kinds of different.
Oh, oh, okay.
If I'm going up to Hornby from the, what was then Infection Central, taking it out to other homes.
Interesting. Okay.
At that time,
Never seen him.
everybody was, oh.
Hey, Belly Rock.
Are we ready to go, Steph?
We're ready to go.
Is Christie with us?
She's right there.
Oh,
Oh,
you
thank
can't
you.
see her. Oh,
I
okay.
can't see her, no.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I think it likes the blue. It's
Yeah.
doing that.
Oh, there we go. I can see both of you right now.
Okay.
Thanks for walking down there, Christie.
Yeah.
You look like you're miles away, you guys.
Yeah. It's harder to see, isn't it, Alison? Well, welcome to the Tuesday, November the 29th, 2022 meeting of the Emergency Program Executive Committee. And so welcome all. This is the first meeting we've had Edward here, Ed Watchman, in person. He just joined a while ago, and wasn't available for the first meeting, unfortunately, but we're pleased to have him at this meeting today. So welcome, Edward.
Thank you.
Welcome, Edward.
So let's begin with approval of the agenda. First item, has everyone had a look at the agenda, and are there any late items that anyone would want to introduce?
I do.
Councillor Fast?
Yeah, I would like to add the Cranimals signs.
The what?
Animals.
Cranimals.
Those are in the action items, but
Okay.
And in my update as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't have. all
Sorry,
these.
yeah, no, I was sick so my kids and I have been consecutively sick for, it's what seems like a month. And so I didn't get out my update until this morning. Did you get that, Steph?
Okay,
Sorry,
so we
I
have,
just-
does it include the $12,000 atmospheric river fee? Charge?
Well, an update on that, yeah,
Okay.
there's no update on that.
Great. Okay, thank you. Then I don't need to add anything. It sounds like it's going to be covered in the update. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, that'll be covered in the current agenda. So can we have an approval to
I move
accept?
that the agenda be approved and circulated.
Second?
A second.
Thank you, Edward. So the agenda is approved. Now move on to item number 2, which is the adoption of the minutes of the July 22nd, 2022 meeting. There's a recommendation that the minutes of the Emergency Program Executive Committee meeting held on 22nd of July, 2022 be adopted. Are there any comments or changes that anyone would like to see, or are those acceptable? Okay,
I move
hearing.
adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Second? Do we need a seconder, Stephanie?
yeah,
Okay,
Aaron second.
okay, thank you. Is that Christie?
Aaron.
Okay, thank you. So, she'd say all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now those minutes are adopted. Do we have any public comments, Stephanie?
No.
Nothing today? No one present at the hall? Okay, so hearing none, we will move on to item number 4, which is the business arising from the minutes. And the first item on the agenda is 4.1, which is the Community Wildfire Resilience Plan. And if you remember, we had that meeting, I think it was presented at a special meeting, a joint meeting of EPEC and council as a whole, I think. And there were certain items that came out of that the recommendations that I think we were going to discuss at this meeting. And I think, Christie, you might have a report on that or an update. Is that correct?
Well, the update is that Councillor Morse sent in some suggestions to the draft, and they were dealt with acceptably. Aaron and I talked about it, Leanne and I talked about it, and so it was basically accepted, and that's all Blackwell does. They don't go they do one round of draft, you can have your say, they deal with those suggestions, and then that's it, basically. So it's going to go forward for approval to the council meeting sometime in December.
Well, we've only got one council meeting, and that's December the 12th, and it's got to be to Sophie by Friday.
Okay, so yeah, I'll do up that staff report. I have it, I just need to do up the staff report. Yep, and send it in. But yeah, she did go through each and every one of your suggestions, Alison, and she did address them.
Yeah.
Change
Okay.
addresses where they need to be changed, etc.
Okay, so the main question, I guess, is we haven't talked about the this committee and how that's going to be reflected in the plan.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Yeah.
there's some FireSmart changes that are happening, and I think maybe we're going to be talking about it later. That don't really involve the CWRP, but basically the way that FireSmart is administered in small communities is probably going to be changing. And so, do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to talk about it when we get to that actual item?
Is there an item for that later on?
Well, it's the third bullet on this agenda item, isn't it? This proposed community FireSmart resiliency committee. So what?
Okay, yeah, we can
I
talk
don't
about it
think
now.
any of us were
Sorry,
happy.
it must be on there twice, I think. So I saw it somewhere
I
else.
don't think any of us were happy with what was in the plan. So, this huge laundry list of people to have in this committee and stuff. So, what did they change, if anything, with that?
So what they're doing is by 2024, it's going to be, in order to get any FireSmart funding, you're going to have either a dedicated FireSmart employee, or you're going to have some kind of a contract with a consulting company such as Blackwell in order to receive any FireSmart funding going forward from 2024. So that person would be responsible for the administration of the FireSmart program here on Bowen Island. Aaron and I have been in contact with Blackwell, and we've asked for them to clarify to us, because they do this for other small communities, and we want to know what services they provide and how it works. They've got it all worked out with the CRI, the Community Resiliency Initiative, and FireSmart. They know who gets charged what. It would not cost the municipality anything. It's all wrapped up in the actual, excuse me, grant funding. So having said that, that would be something that FireSmart consultant would be then taking on, is the development of a FireSmart committee, or, dovetailing off this committee, whatever. We'll have to figure out sort of what makes more sense going forward. But I think until we establish what route we're going to take, it's hard to say, how we're going to move forward with that committee.
Okay, let me back up a second. If I recall what it said in the meeting, or what Blackwell was saying, is that it's a choice of either a full-time, or sorry, part-time person as a FireSmart coordinator, did they say, or what the name was, but either that, or I'm gathering what you're saying is that Blackwell would offer that as a service, and they do offer that probably to other municipalities.
Yes,
So-
as do other forestry companies, not just Blackwell. That's not our only choice.
Okay, so and that decision needs to be made when? Before 2024?
Right.
Is that correct? So we
Yes,
got-
although we're trying to gather information so that we can more effectively use the FireSmart funds that we already have accrued for 2022 and going into 2023. Because it doesn't mean that we can't do it until 2024. It just means that it has to be implemented by 2024.
By 2024. Okay, so what you're thinking is that coming up next year, in fact, we will implement it we'll make a decision and implement it next year. Is that correct, Christie?
Yeah, I think we're just trying to gather information right now and see which way we want to go, if we want to go that way. And then we could even potentially, we have 2022 FireSmart funding that we are not going to be able to touch. It's $50,000. We haven't even put a dent in it, just because it's a complicated program to administer, and you do need somebody sort of on it, you know, dedicated to that program. It's very difficult to just like squeeze it into the emergency program umbrella. So, I mean, even that is an option to go back to the CRI board and just adjust our application pending on what Blackwell's recommendations are. And then we may well be able to even implement that sooner than, well, I guess 2023 would be the earliest, but yeah, we could potentially use some of our 2022 FireSmart funding towards implementing this plan earlier than anticipated.
So would you see us getting a proposal from one or more companies and for that service, and then evaluating that against the cost of that against hiring someone for part-time, bearing in mind that the cost is
I
absorbed?
think so, yeah.
But the cost.
Yeah, that would be sort of like where we'd have to bring Liam in and sort of talk about what's best for the municipality and
Bring your staff recommendations to this committee or to council.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to see a clear understanding of what the requirements are, and like, is it a requirement that UBCM is putting forward, or is it EMBC putting it forward? Like who, and what are they? What things would satisfy the requirement? What are our options?
yeah.
And then what, like, what funding is it tied to? So
Right.
just maybe a simple table that had
Yeah.
some of that
So I think
criteria.
that's what Blackwell's putting together for us, actually,
Right. Okay.
all that information, so that we have a clear understanding of sort of like
Right.
what those types of contracts look like.
And it's not that I don't trust Blackwell, but I would like us, because we're relying on a third-party consultant to basically self-promote themselves.
Yeah,
So let's receive their information, but I would like for you or somebody to connect with the program directly to get a clarity on what their requirements are. Just to cross-reference, and it's just to just make sure that, okay, what Blackwell is telling us is in alignment with what the program requirements are.
sure.
I think I understand what you're saying, Liam, is you want to know what the driver is for this? You want to know,
Yeah,
is it a
exactly.
regulation? Or is it like a provincial regulation? Is it, where's
doubt
it come from?
Yeah, I doubt it's a regulation. It's probably just a funding program policy, but but I don't want to rely on a consultant's advice that basically results in us consulting that consultant.
Well,
No,
that's why
that's
we're gonna get, you know, 3 consultants, probably just like we would with any other, you know what I mean?
Sure, but we're basing our direction off of a consultant to then go for like.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I mean, yeah.
Okay, so
It's
the
not
first step then is to clarify what the driver is for this need. And then having understood that and verified it, then decide where to go from there. Is that how you'd like to proceed, Liam?
Yeah,
So is it,
Okay.
I'm curious, like, you know, as far as the driver is concerned, it's gonna be provincial, it's a provincial. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add that in reading the UBCM application form, it's in the UBCM application specifically says you're required to have a FireSmart staff
Yeah,
member
going
or.
forward, 2024, this is gonna be a requirement.
UBCM requirement.
well, this is what I want clarity on. Is it UBCM or is it EMBC? Because I'm gonna be meeting with the UBCM executive, and if it's their requirement, I'm gonna give them the gears about making that requirement, because it's a pretty tall order for them to require us to have that. And so, and I get it that we can use the funding to fund the position, but it's a bit of a circular kind of weird thing. So
It seems more, I mean, in my opinion, it seems like a positive, actually a positive change. Because the program will be able to be more effectively administrated by somebody who knows what they're doing. Who's an actual FireSmart administrator. That's what they're trained in, that's what they know what they're doing. They know where to spend the money. It's $100,000 that they will give a municipality to put this in place. $100,000 annually.
So this is why we need more information, so we can have it
Yeah.
clearly laid out in front of us, and so we actually understand. Where's the requirement coming from? So I understand it's in the UBCM application form, but it is their requirement, or is it EMBC's requirement? And then what did that open the door for us to, and what do they accept to satisfy that requirement?
Okay, so action item, short report from Christie, checking in on where the program requirement comes from and what the specific criteria is for that.
Yeah, I mean, did I not forward you the application? Or,
I don't know.
An application form,
no, it has all the information. It's not just the application, it's got.
okay,
Okay,
well,
so let's summarize this then. What we want is some sort of written brief memo or report giving us an understanding of who's driving this bus and what the implications are for us, and maybe one or two recommendations as to how to move forward with it. Can we do that?
I got it.
that would be great, because also we elected folks go to the Union of BC Municipalities and we meet with staff and sometimes ministers from all these programs. And we just want to know where, I think it's a good idea to know where the direction is coming from at the province. And so that's, I support this. And do you need a motion?
It's an action item, you're a directing body for Christie.
Okay.
And I think that that memo or report should include the financial implications and how it's funded, just to clarify that as well.
Or the options. Yeah.
Yes, and the options for funding. Because what I'm hearing is it's included as part of the FireSmart grant. If you make an application and it's accepted, you can claim that as a cost against the grant. I think that's what we're hearing. So okay.
Before we vote,
Aaron's got his hand up just in case he can't see.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna make a clarifying point that yes, in the past, all FireSmart grants have been $50,000. Going forward with this new way of doing it, I guess they're $100,000. So they doubled the grant, but put in this requirement. So it's,
And the requirement,
but we just want to find out where the requirement is driven by, not where it's coming from, because it is their requirement.
and the grant will finance the
That's right.
position, which, right.
So Christie, could you liaise with Aaron when you're making your report and bind him in or include him in with the understanding of the recommendations? I think you're both very qualified to do this, the two of you. And that would be good if you can include Aaron in that as well, Christie, when you're writing it up. So as we have the fire department properly represented. Alison.
okay, I finally found the section in the draft report. And it's talking about us, the Bowen Island Emergency Program Executive Committee is to be used jointly as the Bowen Island CFRC, which is this new committee. That's eliminating redundancies. So that makes sense. Recommended additions specific to wildfire planning and mitigation to the committee are listed below. These persons should be involved in meetings of discussions relating to wildfire management, evacuation, or FireSmart vegetation treatments. And they've got BCWS Coastal Fire Center, Wildfire Officer Prevention, Fraser
Page are you
Fire
on,
Zone,
Alison?
Wildfire Technician, MOF Chilliwack Forest District Land and Resource Coordinator, Metro Vancouver Regional Parks District Division Manager, Islands Trust Board Member. Not
Can
quite
you-
sure.
Can you tell me what page you're on?
I'm on page 85 and 86 of the plan.
Thank you.
And then the Bowen Island Community Foundation, I have no idea why they're involved. I think they had some idea that they were running the program for the NERC kiosks rather than just being a funding source on application. And
Yeah, that was amended as well, per your suggestion, Alison.
yeah, so anyhow, that's just, and I don't know, Rotary was in there somewhere at some point.
So that sort of, if I can just jump in there, that kind of speaks to my point that it's complicated. It's a complicated thing when you're starting to get the ministry, all these different, BC Wildfire Service and stuff like that, which, again, all of that, like EPEC, and trying to get those people involved and stuff like that. That's what we're trying to figure out when we're going through this recommendation and how it's going to impact these types of communications or committees or whatever.
They've got a section in the plan.
Yeah, so that's their recommendation. It's just their recommendation at this point. But it's not actually something that we need to follow necessarily. It's just their recommendation. And then we can use that recommendation based on what we decide we're going to do moving forward. And that's where these forestry experts come in. They have the relationships. They already have the relationships with BC Wildfire. They already have the relationships with the Brown or whatever that Windroar. I don't even know how to say that.
It's a new name now.
Yeah, it's a new name now.
Windroar. Call it
Whatever.
Windroar.
But they have those. Like this, so this is part of the problem I think that Aaron and I encounter when we're trying to administer the FireSmart is because there is all of these sort of, intricacies that we're not familiar with. And so it's much harder for sort of like a lay person to administer this program than it is for somebody who already has they know who these people are, they know who's required to be at the table, they know how to make those connections. And so it might be like, I know, Alison, I feel like what you're saying is that it would be quite complex to involve all of these people, but EPEC in FireSmart decision making on Bowen Island. Is that correct?
There's two parts to this, I guess. One is this is the Community Wildfire Resilience Plan. So if this committee is only this CFRC, which I can't, FireSmart and Resiliency Committee, if that's only to deal with FireSmart, then maybe it should be a subcommittee of EPEC with other people brought in as, needed. I'm not sure that we need all those people from the, the province. But the other thing I'm saying is this is a plan that we're being asked to, I'm assuming, if the recommendation that you're going to write in your staff report, which I think your recommendation should be, it should be a recommendation from EPEC, not from staff, no disrespect intended, that are we going to adopt this or are we just going to receive the report? Because if the recommendation is to adopt it, then that's the recommendation that's in there. And we are then going to be required to act on it because the council has adopted the plan as the plan. So there's a whole process issue here.
Maybe Liam can sort of talk to that because
so if the
that's not
recommendation,
my wheelhouse, really.
Saying that if we receive the plan for information, then it's referenced, and if it's adopted, we have to do everything.
Yeah, I would again then want to understand if there's a requirement in the grant program for it to be an adopted plan versus what have you. So we can receive it for information on the 12th of December. And if we determine later that, they want to see it as more of a council endorsed plan, then we can always endorse it and adopt it at a later date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know when I was at the province and we had requirements like that, like for water conservation plans, it had to be council endorsed. So I think for now, it might be safer to just receive it for information. And then that we can endorse it if necessary, but
I guess.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, it's this back to process again. You were sending, I guess, it seems to me the proper process is for the EPEC to receive the report, review the final, and then send it to council for information or endorsement or whatever, or we endorse certain sections. But the other side is if we're going to receive it for information at council, then it needs to be referred to EPEC.
I like the first approach better, Alison.
Well, yeah, and I guess I'm just looking at our terms of reference for the committee. So I haven't looked. I've got three devices going now. I guess I've got to get a fourth.
Is there, I've got a question, Alison. Is there, is it probably for Christie? Are there any time constraints on like councils receiving the report for information or adopting it? And I know the Blackwell contract is basically done.
Yeah,
But is there any other kind of pressing timelines?
it's something I would have to clarify, like if it has to be adopted or if it.
I mean, like by a certain time.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean, like if it has to be actually adopted by a certain time, or if it even actually has to be adopted, or if it can be received information, or.
Because if we want to follow the process of where the report gets basically reviewed and supported and recommended by this committee to council, then we need more runway. We need another month or so.
Yeah, I think it was March that my final report for that FireSmart grant is due.
Right.
So we do have a little bit of time. You know, we don't have to get it right in there right away. My impression was that it's much like the evacuation plan, which also has recommendations, which we also, would actually not even be feasible to implement in ways. So that's sort of how I was looking at it, but I can definitely clarify.
Do you recall if that plan was adopted or whether it was received?
I don't know, if you guys would probably remember that.
September.
Find out.
September
Sorry, which-
14th, I know, September 14th, 2020, evacuation plan adopted by council.
Yay! On full staff. I was going into action directly.
Well, you can check. I mean, you know, these are just handwritten notes, so.
I thought that was adopted, but there's not.
Yeah, and same with our last CWPP, also that was done in 2007. I believe that was adopted with recommendations that were not necessarily, you know,
Implemented.
no, you couldn't.
Scanned by helicopter, we didn't. follow
Well,
that.
exactly, like you know, there's the ideal that we'd love to be able to implement all the recommendations, and then there is sort of like, well, these would be great to implement if we had.
But there is, I mean, from an exposure point of view, you do open yourself up if you adopt a plan versus receiving it for information. So because
Absolutely.
adopting a plan, and it is not just implied, it's understood that you will act in that plan.
You will
So that
implement it.
can be held accountable later. Saying like, you adopted this, you said that means you would implement this.
Okay, so what I can do then is go back to my contact at UBCM and just clarify whether the plan needs to be adopted. I'm sure Brady could answer that actually.
Right.
But yeah, like if one way or the other, clarify whether or not it needs to actually be adopted.
Adopted
in order-
or endorsed or is
Yeah,
received, okay.
A lot of requirements.
yeah.
Okay, Alison, did you find out anything in your research there?
Oh, well, yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at our terms of reference. The responsibilities of the executive committee, providing strategic direction and oversight to the emergency program coordinator, finalizing the annual strategic plan and budget and present to the council, which I think we haven't really done, approving emergency plans, and then a meeting timeline. We may strike whatever subcommittees and working groups as being necessary. And the emergency program coordinator is accountable to the executive committee, that's us, and they're responsible for the overall management and coordination of emergency preparedness, response and recovery, and for developing and maintaining an emergency program. So I guess the question is, where does the FireSmart program administration, is it part of the emergency program? And do we because we already have an emergency coordinator, do we have a dedicated person? And is that person part-time, full-time, or, you know, does the dedicated person need to be a 2-hour
I
job?
don't know that Is
7 days.
FireSmart under the emergency program?
I'll be honest and say, I'm not sure if
I don't even know, like, I know, you know, we kind of came up because, as you guys know, my position is funded 15 hours a week. And so the extra 7 hours was coming out of Aaron's budget, which was coming from FireSmart, which was supposed to be dedicated to FireSmart activities. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there is.
I think the first thing here is
15
to get,
hours is very, you know, it's a
Yeah.
small amount of time to administer such a big program. And so, I mean, if FireSmart was taken off my plate, I would be a very happy person. And if we could get that paid for by the government and done actually in a better way, then I feel like it's a win-win situation for everybody involved.
did I understand you, Christie, to say if FireSmart was taken off of your job description?
Yeah, I think when
If you're happy.
Jennifer was doing FireSmart, at some point it was taken off of her plate. And then maybe Marissa, I think, was doing it for a while. The actual fire department administrator was doing that. And then when I came back on, it was like, you know, well, how can we get a few more hours in here? And so, okay, let's take on some FireSmart duties, and Aaron's gonna cover that out of the fire department budget. But I mean, it's certainly not enough to properly administer the program on top of all the other programs that are under, well, not programs, but like things that are underneath the emergency program umbrella.
So where's
Well, that-
the legislative authority for the FireSmart program? Is that falling under the Emergency Program Act?
That's what I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
Don't know who.
It's not EMBC, that's for sure. It's like different, it's definitely different.
And they're still amending it.
Like BC Wildfire, they're the ones who sort of like manage the FireSmart program. And BC Wildfire doesn't really have anything to do with emergency management. BC, they're just their own thing, just dealing with fires.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I'm off track on this. The FireSmart is something that we choose to do. We're not legislated in any way to do it. It's a program that we choose to participate in, I believe.
Yeah.
But whose authority the program is run by, and where's the, you know, I guess the legislative, is it just a program?
I think it's BC Wildfire Service, but I could be wrong on that. You know, I'd have to clarify, but I'm pretty sure it's BC Wildfire Service.
I'm guessing it probably is by the basis of the suggested members to the committee from the Blackwell report.
So let's include that. Sorry, Councillor Fast, go ahead.
I just had a suggestion that when Christie is checking on what level of council attention is required, whether it needs to be endorsed or approved or just received. Also, if there's any implications on funding. I'm sure that's what you'll do, but just to make that clear, whether we can use that 2022, can we carry it over if we've only received it, you know, those kinds of
For
questions.
the plan,
Yeah.
or no, it's been,
Oh, that's FireSmart. Never mind. That's different.
Yeah.
I just anything about any funding implications, just checking
Yeah,
about that
yeah.
too. That'd be great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so let's, we've got 45 minutes on this thing here already. And I think we need to move on, but this is important nevertheless. So I think what we're looking at is a report from Christie with assistance and input from Aaron as necessary, and Liam overseeing it. The report of the memo is going to deal with the driver behind this, the requirement for the wildlife plan, the driver behind some understanding of who the FireSmart people are, how do they fit in, and basically what are the recommendations coming out of that, and the options in a recommendation of how do we move forward with trying to meet this requirement for 2023. Is that it's not a very, I'm not summarizing it very well, to be quite honest, because we have
That's
rambled
fine.
back forward here.
That's what I have for the FireSmart piece, and then for the wildfire plan is to find out whether it's adopted or endorsed, and if there are implications for funding, and what the timeline constraints are possibly on that.
And ideally, as soon as we get that final report on December the 12th, I'd like to see it circulated, please, to EPEC, so we can review it and then.
Am I doing a staff report for December the 12th? Because now we're going to be investigating. If
No,
we're
no,
getting it, putting it
No,
through
just-
The Blackwell report, I think, is coming on December the 12th. Is that correct? Final?
No, which Blackwell report are you talking about? Are you
I'm
talking
sorry?
about the CWRP? For the C-
Yes.
Okay, so I think Liam had suggested that we look at, instead of bringing it forward to council right away, do we have time to be able to figure out if we can just receive it, or do we need to adopt it, or whatever? And I said that we had until March 31st in order to do those things. So is that what we want to do, is investigate first?
So you're
I'm
gonna,
not sure. I'm finding it hard to follow this argument without being in person, quite honestly. And being there with you, I'm finding it hard to, because it's quite a complex discussion, to do on a Zoom call. Can you give me some direction, Liam, as to what you're thinking here?
I understand, Bill. It's been a bit circular and hard to understand all the moving pieces. So what I'm thinking, and this is just my thoughts, is that rather than bring forward the Blackwell report on December 12th, that we wait until the new year and we don't identify which council meeting in the new year it comes forward on yet. And during that time, Christie will reach out to the UBCM program staff to confirm, like, who established the requirement for having a dedicated staff member attributed to Wildfire to be eligible for funding, and what is the criteria to meet that requirement, and do we have to have our CWRP endorsed by council, or is it enough to simply receive it for information, because the report in and of itself contains a heavy load of requirements for a small community to implement, and we don't want to increase our risk exposure. And I think we could get those questions answered by the UBCM staff, and then it should also be reflected in Blackwell's work. And Blackwell is coming forward with a separate little mini report, let's say, that's identifying a potential path forward for satisfying these requirements. And so now we can cross-reference to make sure they make sense. And then when we go to council in January, we're saying, okay, we need you to either adopt or simply receive this report. And we need to consider hiring a third-party consultant and seeking this funding and these kind of things. Because I feel like right now, if we went to council on the 12th, there'd be some questions we couldn't answer. And I think I heard Christie say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we probably have until March before we have to finalize any action to satisfy the current grant funding requirement.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so Liam, our contract around the CWRP is done by the end of this year. However,
Yep.
my final report to receive the grant funding for that particular grant involving the CWRP is not due until the end of March.
Yeah.
So we have some time to present it to council in whichever way is going to be the most beneficial.
So no more changes to the report. the CWRP, but I think we've got time to do a little more investigation about the best path forward and better understand the requirements to be eligible for this $100,000 in the future. Does that make sense, Bill?
It makes sense to me. Before you, Alison, Steph, did you get the essence of what Liam was saying?
I have the essence. Thank you.
Okay, Alison.
Thanks.
I just sent everybody a link to something off UBCM's website. And I went down and looked at the webinar they did in November 2022. I guess I just had it about applying. And the slide for the webinar says we must be a lower risk community, risk class 4 or 5, up to 100,000. All activities will be funded for 2 years, one application between October 1, 2022 and December 31, 2023. Applicants will be advised of their status within 90 days of submitting an application. So it looks like we've got we don't have to have anything in this year for the 2023 funding, but we'll have to get something. But it's a 2-year program. So I don't know if that's 100,000 per year or 100,000 for 2 years, each year for 2 years. So.
Yeah, so I think that's what we're going to be trying to clarify.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff on the UBCM website, and there's an actual narrative. You can listen to what was presented on the slides. They presented the thing twice, on July 15th and October 13th. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. So I think maybe before you phone UBCM, somebody should read that.
Read that.
Yeah.
It looks very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alison.
Okay.
Can we just take an action item arising out of what Stephanie's got there written down and take that as the outcome of this discussion?
Yes.
Yeah,
Everybody agreed?
yes.
Yes.
Don't try to summarize it. Put it in. Stephanie,
move on.
I mean, action item.
let's move on from that. You got it. It's important that we did that. Thank you. So that I think that covered all of item 4.1, unless anybody thinks otherwise. I'd like to move on to item 5.1, mutual aid with Metro Vancouver. And Liam, I think you were going to talk about that. The mutual aid letter you have with Metro.
Yes, just pulling that up. Essentially, Metro has established here it is here. A regional public works mutual aid agreement with not just all of the member municipalities within the Metro area, but it also includes UBC as well, and the province of British Columbia. And as well as the Tsawwassen First Nation, who is recognized as a member of the Metro region. And essentially what the mutual aid agreement does is it says that if you have an emergency that requires the assistance of public works staff, that your neighbors will come to your aid. And so ideally it would be your closest, nearest neighbor that would first come to your aid, or you would go to their aid if they needed assistance. But it doesn't have to be your nearest neighbor. There are provisions in the agreement that would say, okay, if there needs to be aid from further afield, then that's okay too. But it effectively lays out the conditions in which that aid is supplied and really kind of gets into the nitty gritties of paying and recovering staff time, things like that. So my sense is that as a region, we would all be very supportive and come to each other's aid in a catastrophic event where we needed to support each other. But what this does, it just spells out like, okay, this is how legally and financially and from jurisdictional and operational perspective, it would actually work. The reality on the ground is that we're not likely able to provide a lot of aid in the need of somebody else, but rather we would be on the receiving end. And they understand that, but that's the case with Lions Bay, Belcarra, and Anmore, and the other small communities in the region too. We'd be looking to West Vancouver and probably the North Vancouver folks for aid, and they would be more than happy to come and provide that aid. The agreement is very comprehensive and thorough. I don't think we need to go through the details. It just basically sets up like, okay, if we call out for aid, this is how we then reimburse or recover funds and things like that.
Thank you, Liam. I have a couple of questions, but Councillor Fast, you go first.
I'm just wondering, have we signed this agreement?
Yes.
And when was that?
It was just this fall.
Okay, thank you. That's close enough for me. Thank you very much.
I was going to suggest, Liam, that you make the new council aware of this at some point, because there'll be other members there in the new council who may not be aware of that. It's quite an important thing for them to know. If they could do that. And also the EOC staff, which I think you lead, Liam, I think you're the EOC director.
Yep.
Incident commander, I think, is that correct? Or is it might be Aaron?
I'm the EOC director.
Okay, so you could make sure that the other people on your executive of that EOC executive, whatever you call it, are aware of that, which I think you probably have anyway.
And that takes me to another topic, but I shouldn't do that, should I?
Do you want to put that on the agenda?
Well, it just leads me to wanting to make sure that we set aside time for the new council to have an EOC briefing. And we should do that at the EOC, but that can wait until the new year. But just to bring them up to speed with what our emergency program and how it operates and who does what in the event of an emergency.
Yeah, I think that's very critical, especially since we have so many new members on council. Good. I don't think there's any action item coming out of that. Sure. Any other questions?
Councillor Morse, I thought Councillor Morse said it.
Liam said exactly what I was going to say. We need an update on emergency management procedures for the new council. I guess the only other thing would be to maybe invite the emergency program executive committee.
I like that idea. I think if we did that as a meet and greet, and it'd be good for all of us to have a refresher and just
I totally agree. And I just want to also put out there that all of that information is also on the emergency management plan, which is on the website available anytime anybody wants to read it. So just so you know, you guys know that it is out there. And I think it was brought to their attention, actually, that was brought to their attention when.
Can you tell how many times that plan has been accessed on the website and looked at by anybody?
I don't think we need to find that out, but
all I'm saying is that it's the information is there and available should council want to edify themselves on this subject. However, I do agree that it's a great idea to get everybody in person and talk about it as well. That's all.
I agree. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. Just support for the idea. I remember when I was very first elected, I was acting mayor in July and the mayor went away and I was going, oh my gosh, because the fire department started putting up the severe fire things and there was a drought and I was kind of going, where's our emergency plan? We had to find it in a binder and I had a black and white copy, so I didn't know, I couldn't understand it. Anyway, I think it's a really good idea to get everybody up so that they trust each other in an emergency. Thank you.
I think I would just add there that to compliment Ed on his NERP staff, because we had at a third point, we had an email yesterday and this morning from Jesse Montgomery, who is our NERP, giving us a link to the EPC program and all that data, and also getting the Hood Point area caught up with where Eagle Cliff is in terms of a booth. I think we discussed that at the last meeting very briefly, but Ed, your group is right on top of things. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I've got one question about briefing council. Since the mayor plays a vital role in any emergency, would it make sense to at least brief Andrew on his role sooner than later, as opposed to waiting for a full council meeting?
Yeah, and that's something that I can just touch base with him too. I mean, the mayor's role is also really contingent on the scale of the emergency too. And one of the things, my sense from Andrew is that he would do a pretty good job of standing up in the event of an emergency. And so I think I can easily give him the very quick 5-minute spiel on what the mayor needs to do in that kind of situation.
But will he be moving trees like Gary was last time?
Yeah, not part of the job description.
That's a good suggestion, Ed. Thank you very much, and Liam, I think it's good to do that exactly as was suggested. Okay, Radar Hill. Okay, that's with the excerpt. The update on excerpt from September 26th council meeting, mutual aid and Radar Hill. I can't remember what that is. Does anybody know?
These are just bits and pieces that are.
I think the Radar Hill, like, was the committee looking for an update on the work from Coast Guard?
I
What about
included
the other
next.
work? The clearing around the
Yes.
sites that are up there that we got a
Yeah,
grant.
that's the Coast Guard work.
The Coast Guard, yes. Is there an update or?
Well, essentially, Alison might know more because of her neighborhood is also involved, but the Coast Guard has a development permit application in with the municipality to clear 6 hectares of trees to improve line of sight of their radar for marine traffic safety. And everything looks to be quite good for approving that permit. However, we're waiting for a final report back from Coast Guard from their hydrogeologist for an assessment of impacts from the clearing on the surface water. And I have not heard anything since that. And so I'm not, Alison, have you or your neighborhood received any additional information on that work?
The hydrologist came out and met with, wasn't part of it, 2 or 3 members of the Strata Council, and they walked around and looked at where the possible creeks that could be impacted or where there could be potential runoff. And I think everybody was relatively satisfied that the ditches were adequate and the culverts were adequate, and there wouldn't be any downstream flood, that they could handle any potential downstream runoff. And I don't think they're pulling the stumps, which also will help.
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah. So the hydrogeologist said he circulated his updated report, but nobody's seen it yet.
Right.
So and the other thing is, technically, because it's the province and Crown land, once they give permission, they're getting the DP out of courtesy, not because they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
understood.
exactly. They can carry on without our approval, but they are waiting.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
I think they wanted to do it in, before the bird nesting season. So,
Yep, I can understand that.
yeah.
That's good enough for me for that item. Any other questions from anybody else?
But there was
Mhm.
another program where there was clearing going to be done, where we got a grant. I remember with Marissa, maybe that's already been done, Aaron. Did they clear all the sort of around the other facilities that had nothing to do with the Coast Guard facility?
No, they did some survey work and that's as far as it got. They just determined it was low on their list of priorities.
And that's the province that was going to do that, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
It is
So they
too
haven't done that
expensive.
yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's on
Okay.
permanent hold.
That was Radar Hill as well?
Yes.
I think for that, they were also contemplating Mount Gardner too. For
That was part of it, yes, and it's.
That was the fire risk
Yeah.
lowering.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That probably would complete that item. Item 5.2 is the staff update, which was circulated this morning. Thank you, Christie. Would you like to deal with that?
Sure, yeah, I'll just go over it at sort of high level here. I sent the report to everybody, so and again, apologize for the lateness.
No need to apologize. Go ahead.
Thank you. So financial grants completed. We've received funds for the 2020 UBCM ESS grant, which included the purchase of a new trailer and some tablets and a tent. So that's all done and dusted. That's 2020. We got it. We got paid. Did the final report, got paid, and moving on from that. Right now, ongoing with our UBCM grants, we have the 2021 EOC capacity building repeater, which is the repeater that we're planning on putting up on Mount Gardner. This is taking longer than anticipated because Industry Canada has had to be consulted on this because there's so many signals up there, and the Chroma Communications, who's the company that we've used to facilitate this whole thing, they are sort of at the mercy of Industry Canada, waiting to be assigned, I don't know what they're called, signals, Aaron? Waiting to be assigned signals.
Rated frequencies, I guess.
Yeah, frequencies. So that's kind of on hold until we hear, and I'm in contact with UBCM constantly, just giving them updates. We're still waiting for Industry Canada with that, so. And so it says, anticipated completion date of December 31st, 2022, that I meant to change that. That's not going to be done by December 31st, 2022.
No, it'll take time.
Yeah, it maybe I'd change that to maybe March, end of March, 2023 at this point. 2022 ESS grant is currently being administered. $25,000 in grant funding. That was for the purchase of another trailer for storage for what we're calling the West Side Emergency Response Hub, which is basically Fire Hall 2 and our secondary EOC. So we're going to have emergency supplies here at Fire Hall 1, and then we're going to have emergency supplies at Fire Hall 2, essentially ensuring that we have access from either side of the island. So that's a great forward movement in that realm.
So it has been purchased?
Yeah, the trailer's been purchased. Yep, and it's being picked up this week.
Yay.
And then Carolyn McDonald, our ESS director, has been busy purchasing the reception center supplies that are going to be housed in that trailer. So yeah, that's moving forward nicely. 2022 EOC upgrade grant, which is basically the grant money that we got approved for, $25,000 to increase our EOC capacity by purchasing furnishings and equipment to run the EOC at the new fire hall. So we're moving forward with that. We've already purchased some sundry furniture, office equipment, and we've got Sea to Sky providing a quote for the AV system. Probably get another few other quotes as well. to try and so because we want to make that room as multi-purpose as possible. So it will be a dedicated EOC. We'll have all of our equipment and everything that we need to respond being stored, but then it's also available for people to use and with a good functional audio-visual system and stuff like that.
Like this? Could it do a Zoom
Yeah,
meeting?
just like this. Yeah,
Thank
but it's much larger. It's really nice. Have you been? Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it. Yeah, yeah. So that's what's going on with that grant. And then we've got the 2 FireSmart grants that we're still working through. 2021, we've talked about this already. Yeah, so just touching on, Blackwood, they've created it and now we're gonna do something with it, whether that's receive it or adopt it or whatever, we're gonna figure that out. And then 2022, FireSmart grant, we've got again $50,000. And this is where we solicited Blackwell to investigate the possibility of using funds in order to contract a consultant to administer the program. And again, it's going to be a requirement for FireSmart going forward 2024, but we're just looking at it right now. We're just investigating and gathering information and getting some situational awareness going on, and then we'll make a decision on that, or somebody will. New grants. So we applied for the 2022 UBCM, volunteer fire department equipment and training grant. We're waiting decision on that. I'm going to say probably we'll hear something. We might hear something back by the end of December.
Maybe, yes.
So we applied for $30,000 in grant funding to purchase about 26 grand worth of equipment to equip the newly acquired firefighting apparatus or the fire truck, and then also some communications equipment that's needed for the truck as well. So that's the newest grant that we've applied for.
Sorry, can I ask just a question before you move on? With respect to those grants and so forth, even to the very first one, in the radar, sorry, going back to the improving the communications by the very first item, whatever it was.
Yeah, the Mount Gardner repeater, yeah.
I wanted to ask just clarification and confirmation again from Aaron that none of these are impacting on your capability to respond.
No, not in any way. No.
Okay, thank you.
If anything, they're going to be improving. Fire department, public works, like radio communication on island. That was the whole point, was to try and improve that communication.
Fine, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. The extreme heat response planning. So staff had done there was a few, it's either you or Sophie. You're looking at me strangely, like you didn't do it, did you? There
was a draft that would come out before the EPEC meeting that, and then that those corrections were flagged by Councillor Fast during the council meeting to be applied. I have not done those.
Okay. So then Sophie did them.
Okay.
Yeah, Sophie did them. So it's just waiting to sort of be reviewed. It's just sitting there in my email right now. And then we'll be sending it to council.
Good, you're gonna sign off on that.
Yeah. And it's fallen a little bit to the back of the queue because of the weather. Yeah. So, but anyways, it's on its way to being a done deal. So then the other end of the spectrum, the extreme weather response planning, we've got a very loose sort of procedure or a plan around extreme weather events, like kind of something like what we're experiencing today. I did speak to Corporal Caleb the other day. He advised that both of the people that we see underhoused typically in the Cove have adequate housing going into this year's winter. So that's good news. And there may be others, there are other people that are not as visible as Janice and Ryan, for example, but sorry.
I'm just curious about the adequate housing for, sorry, what's that?
It's just because it's a public meeting, maybe we shouldn't use names.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm just curious if the van that's been parked by Cribbin Park is considered housing.
Well, I mean, I don't know, it depends on whose standards that is, but I mean, when I spoke to Corporal Kayla, my concern was that person's well-being, and he advised that he thought that they were fine in that capacity. So I don't know who's, you know what I mean?
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Just because, and I don't have a problem talking about it in a public meeting, but that van is in violation of our bylaws and has been for quite some time.
Yeah.
And can't remain there indefinitely. So it's not, it's good because it provides perhaps better shelter for this type of inclement weather, but it's not a viable long-term solution. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I just said there may be other underhoused living elsewhere on the island. They may or may not be open to accepting shelter services. Corporal Kayla was kind of under the impression that they would not be interested in accepting those services. So, you know, it's always the issue of, I spoke to Tina about it, we had a meeting, and it's always the issue of staffing, and especially staffing overnight, and also with individuals who have special requirements, possibly you might need special training, or you definitely need 2 people to be working in that type of a situation in an overnight shelter. So we do have the space, we do have the capacity, and if push came to shove, you know, we could open those doors up, and the cost of it is covered by EMBC, but it's the logistics of actually the human resources that are the problem behind that. So
Library or the Cove Commons?
No.
yeah, it's
Is that the new room?
yeah,
Library
exactly.
annex.
Yeah, the annex. And anything with that? Or
Sorry. Are you
Nothing.
finished, Christie?
not quite. I'm just gonna go. So NERP, well, Edward's here. You probably talked to NERP, but basically still overseeing the program, but still looking for a successor and or help with administration. Right, Edward?
That's right.
Okay.
thank you, Ed.
One quick thing, some good news here. We did a canvassing of NERP volunteers asking for updates on information, contact information, and most importantly, permission to share their contact information with the emergency program, first responders, and all other NERPs. And we got a very strong response, both people responding to that, which means that people still have it on their radar, even though we don't always hear from them. And we've got about 85 NERP volunteers right now. So I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
I've got a couple people who will help me with administration, but I'd still at some point like to pass the torch. That's it.
And you'd be pleased to hear that it was a topic of discussion around the campfire on Halloween evening, believe it or not. And I didn't bring it up, but people just started talking about NERPs. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a bunch of nerds we all are.
Nerds or nerds?
Nerdy nerds.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, Ed. Thank you very much.
Okay, another community program, the AED program. So Liam and Aaron and I are gonna have to sit down and have a talk about the AED program, just because it's become a little bit difficult to manage. Yeah, I don't know how deep do we want to go into this?
That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we lost our volunteer who was administering it, and then we thought we were gonna have another volunteer, and then she backed out, and so anyway. I will
That's
update
good.
everyone at the next meeting
Thank you.
on that, but it's actively being looked at right now and trying to find ways to keep it viable. Alertable, yeah, still actively promoting Alertable. It's well used on Bowen Island, and the municipality is really good at marketing to the public. Naloxone is the same. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the media releases and stuff about opioid deaths in the province is out of control. So we are continuing to provide naloxone to businesses within the cove, high traffic businesses or whatever, just so they have it on hand. And then just as a point of interest, I guess Gail Little is now the, what is it called?
She's the unit chief.
Unit chief for our emergency health services or BC ambulance station. So we're going to be talking to her about doing a rec program on naloxone administration once she kind of settles into her role as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. ESS actively looking to bolster its membership. They just got 2 or 3 new members, which is nice. We did look into trying to get some provincial funding for Carolyn McDonald because she puts in a lot of time as the ESS director, but that is a no-go. It has to come from the municipality. And okay, so this is where public communications is where we're going to talk about the cranimal signs.
Okay.
Or the wildfire signs, I'd like to call them. So anyway, Liam and Aaron and I discussed this afterward. And I think Liam, one of the action items was, or somebody had the action item was trying to figure out the Bowen Island signage policy and sort of what, you know, where those signs fell under that policy and if we were going to be able to, you know.
I think the words were donor recognition policy because the benches and is one of the things I know that Parks, Trails and Greenways had discussed earlier on. And then we've got these big capital projects that have naming donor sides of things. And so I thought at one time we did have a draft policy.
We have a donor recognition.
You do?
Yeah, and the language was signage policy.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I think I had brought it up and it was because I was concerned about the donor recognition stuff. And do we want to have
that policy was adopted, I think, more in context with community center, and there's also been work done with public art world as well.
Oh, right.
But signage is very loose, bounces off so many desks and so many departments.
Is that something that's going to be addressed?
I think it was, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think it was upon discussion, it was sort of, it wasn't, there was no infraction, there was no, it wasn't going against any policy. And in fact, there had been other private businesses that were mentioned in donorship terms with like steps at public art and different things on the island. So with that in mind, and the fact that she'd already donated the signs and we were going to be able to have, Ian had volunteered to put the signs up and we were going to have to dig posts and it was going to be on municipal property, then we were going to go ahead with that initiative, which we did. And I haven't received, you know, it's been positive. The feedback we've received has been positive thus far.
Thank you. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. And then
maybe-
just plan tasks. Yeah, so this is it. This is sort of, I'm at the end of my update here. So just still business continuity planning. That's something that's on the radar, but doesn't really ever seem, we never seem to have time to get to it. ID for BIM staff and volunteers. These are just, yeah, not really necessary, I guess, for you guys to know these things. Sort of details, but yeah. If anybody has any questions about those, they can come to me.
Those are planned tasks sometime next year. Is that what you're thinking, Christie?
They're just sort of, yeah, you know, they're things that have been, that need to be dealt with. Haven't been dealt with yet.
What is that?
Or need to
emergency
be discussed anyway, need to be
Okay.
discussed. Yeah.
One of those, what's the emergency management team meeting? Winter 23, 22. Is that?
Yeah, so
something-
when Jen was EPC, she had the emergency management committee or team committee or something like that, which was a different committee that they've disbanded the committee because of the abundance of committees. But
Yep.
we still think that, and I'm talking about Aaron and I and other people sort of involved in emergency response, that it's good to have the responders actually meeting on, you know, whatever it is, like a biannual basis, even to discuss any issues that might come up. So we're talking about public works, RCMP, BC ambulance, fire, emergency program, you know. So that's what, when I'm saying emergency management team, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think Jen did have one or at least one of those during her time. Is
Yeah.
Liam, are you thinking that that you would have a meeting at some point about those folks? I don't know. Do you have any tabletop meetings with your EOC planned, Christie, Liam?
Are you talking about a tabletop exercise?
Yeah.
Like training?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. That's on my radar. That's probably going to be, because 2023, I can apply for another EOC grant. And so I wanted to put training and maybe even something a little bit more complex than just a tabletop. I went to one in Squamish that was very detailed, very well done, and was sort of a hands-on practical response that was put on by one of their private companies, but paid with via a grant. And it was excellent. It was just sort of like real time, you know, response, exactly tailored to that. It was the SLRD that was doing the exercise. So it was tailored to their region. And so if we can do that, I mean, those aren't cheap, but I think it would be, if I can get it covered by the EOC grant, it would be invaluable, I think, to have that type of training exercise. So that's hopefully the plan in 2023. I'm going to put that forward for our grant.
Yeah,
I think it will make sense. Sorry, Liam, were you going to speak, Liam?
I was just going to say that ideally we would be doing some level of EOC training every year as a refresher. And so Christie and I haven't had a chance to touch base on the details, but we know that that's what we aspire to. And so the last time we had any formal training was November 2021. And so maybe what we do is like every 2 years, we do a bigger event, a bigger training session where we're bringing in professionals from outside, and then in the interim year, we're doing an in-house just a refresher, folks. Let's remind ourselves of who does what and how these things unfold, and something like that. I think it would be tough for us to do a full-blown exercise every year. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Morse.
You'd include council in this tabletop exercise?
It depends on the type of exercise, but
Incident.
not.
Yeah, the incident.
And not necessarily, because council as a whole, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but council as a whole doesn't really have a lot of role to play, rather than the mayor has the authority to declare a local state of emergency, and the mayor can play a strong role in the activation of an EOC. But my understanding and my sense of things is that council would not be in the EOC.
No.
Well, I guess
I guess
when
that's
I was
correct.
thinking of a tabletop exercise, I remember going to one couple of terms ago, and a couple of us were there from council, but council did have a role, and this was a particular one where council had to authorize the demolition of a house as a FireSmart, as a protection to stop an advancing wildfire. So I guess that was, the part we had so there's some roles sometimes council has when you have an emergency.
Sure. And I think actually, like in the declaration of a local state of emergency, like you would then have the authority to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly circumstances where mayor and council might be required to make a rapid decision to support the response. But again, I don't imagine I would be calling council into chambers to do that. I would probably be doing that by email ratification at a later council meeting. But these types of things are all good for council to know and to understand. So I think it's important to have a briefing for council on how the EOC operates and how we stand up in EOC and what dictates this a local state of emergency, things like that.
Yeah.
I just have not envisioned council participating in a tabletop exercise.
And I think that makes sense because it really depends on the nature of the incident. Liam, all I was thinking of when I brought this up was that sometime in the new year, or rather you get the people who are involved in the EOC, like the fire chief, the RCMP, et cetera, yourself and your team, just get together in the new EOC room, familiarize yourself with the equipment, all the new equipment, and maybe have a discussion on how you would operate it in an emergency, and just like a brief introduction is all I was thinking. So you're not cold whenever something happens.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do with the emergency management team meetings.
Good. That's exactly right there. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's move on then. Christie, thank you very much for your report. I don't think anybody had any other questions. I said there's an item here that says.
Just that one.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, just about the $12,000 for the EOC.
Oh, yeah.
Certificate the money.
Not yet. I anticipate we will though, but as you can imagine, that atmospheric river absolutely annihilated EOC.
I'm sure they're flooded.
Yes, yes.
To make it
No pun intended. Yeah. So they actually, when I put that application through, it was understood that it was going to take, minimum a year to hear back from them. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, item number 6, review of action items from previous meetings. What I was thinking there was an answer to the question of my old harping song is the disposal of debris from disaster debris, and confirmation as to where that we have a location to store that debris as per that plan that came up 5 years ago. Liam, I think you were going to look into that. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. That was on my to-do list, and unfortunately I have not followed up with that.
Okay.
And as I recall, we have very limited space to store debris, and in some cases you would need approval, and ideally you have that predetermined as a debris storage location.
Well, I know you're very busy, and I think you just put it on the to-do list right near the bottom somewhere, so as we don't forget about it, because it's not urgent by any means of stretch of the imagination, but it's something that's hanging out there.
And I do want to also add that in the event that we had a disaster, something of the magnitude where we had a significant amount of debris that we had to store somewhere, probably the pre-op would be involved, the provincial, regional emergency operations center. And, they would be also there to facilitate that for us as well. They're experts, that's what they do.
Yeah, but they wouldn't necessarily know where to put it locally. If this was a report that went back about 5 years ago that was done by Metro Vancouver Emergency Planning Committee. And they designated a couple of sites, one anyway on Bowen Island. And they were trying to get everybody on each municipality to agree as to where these locations were, so that they didn't have to go through that in the event of an emergency. They knew exactly where all the trees and stumps and garbage was going to go. from clearing roads, etc., and clearing forest land. I just think we need to know where that is, because the worst thing that can happen is we end up dumping it in a park, and it becomes a public issue, which like happened in North Vancouver not so long ago, that a park was kind of destroyed, I believe, by doing something like that. So I just want us to be prepared and know exactly where we're going to dump this stuff in the future. But you know, that's all.
It seems like, I don't know, Liam, do you think it's, like, it almost seems like something that is like, we need an expert or somebody to make that determination, you know, not just sort of like pick a place on island, or what do you think?
I think I could probably connect with the general manager at Metro on environmental services to see what they do, if they have anything, and that they then can maybe help inform what we would then be looking at. And my understanding is that you might need pre-authorization from Ministry of Environment for, depending on the type of debris, because you could have toxic materials that you may have stored and contained. Mostly what I'm thinking on Bowen, it will be a large volume of tree and woody debris, and we would be stockpiling it at the Veterans Park or something of that nature. But if you get into toxic or hazardous waste, then typically you would want that to be predetermined, and you would have at least some sort of a plan in place, like for containment.
Yeah, that's why it seems like it should be more like a plan. You know what I mean? Like a sort of, you know,
Thought out ahead of time.
an actual thought out
With criteria.
comprehensive plan, as opposed to just, well, you
Yeah,
know,
here's a
Well,
spot.
I think the first thing is to go back and
yeah,
first thing is to go back and get that report and read it. If anybody hasn't read it, they should
I'm
read it,
looking
because
at the one we had the link to, and it's very outdated for contact information. So
Yeah.
I guess one of the questions is, does Metro have an updated version?
that's correct. I don't even know if it was finalized, to be honest. But let's ask Metro if they have something that they can provide it to the municipality, and then take it from there. Okay, I don't want to belabor that because we're over time. Item 7.1 is how often do we meet? I think the regulation or the bylaw says we should meet biannually, which is twice a year.
Minimum.
So at minimum, yeah. I was thinking quarterly myself, but I don't know what anybody else thinks. Do we have some opinion on that?
I guess to me, it depends on the workload.
Sorry, was that you, Sue Ellen? I didn't.
Yeah, I have my hand up. I was thinking maybe we should meet before or after, probably right after the March 31st. Christie talked about a few deadlines there. And so once she got her final reports in, maybe we could recommend whether to send them to council or something. I don't know. But it seems like that time of the year might be a good time in the spring before the fire season and the drought season and all that kind of thing. Maybe just twice a year.
Sorry, Councillor Morse.
Well, I guess there's one thing in our terms of reference that talks about a strategic plan and money and funding. So, and recommending a budget to council. So we haven't really done that. And I guess, is there going to be budget money needed coming out of this CWRP, if I got the acronym right, that we're going to need to be asking council to include in their budget? I mean, even if it's going to be grant funded, it needs to go into the budget. You've got the revenue source and the expenditure source, and you don't spend the money unless you get the grant. But so maybe we need to think about ongoing budget needs.
When do you have your budget?
I think
meetings?
it was maybe dealt with previously, because it's a 2021, grant.
Yeah.
Well,
and
what are we going to spend money on in 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027?
As a department, so
Yeah. It's just, I mean, Kristen and I have just had very sort of casual meetings about budget. It hasn't really changed much since inception.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sort of hearing any conclusions, but except there's importance to have one before the summer and one after the summer, and maybe one before the end of the year. That would be at least a minimum of 3. So maybe I think you need one to sort of highlight. Yes, there are things we need to do during the summer season and the fire season.
Yes.
One at the end of that to review where we were, and then one before the end of the year to see where we're going next year. So maybe 3 meetings anyway.
Yeah.
A year would work.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. So Christie, we'll leave it to you to organize those between you and Steph, maybe March and September and November sort of thing.
okay.
Or you can have one at the call of you can have one anytime you need one, you can add an extra one. But if somebody decides it's important. Sorry, Alison.
Well, I guess all these questions we have about the CWRP and what we have to do with it and all that sort of stuff. And if there's any budget implications to any of those things, we need to do it earlier than March. It needs to be sort of January, probably.
When do you set your budget as a council?
Well, it has to be, we'll be starting to talk about, we theoretically, it should be set before the end of the year to have, because but it'll be, the timeline, I think, is sort of February, March for public consultation and all that sort of stuff. So we need to get what we want in requests in early.
So maybe put the March one forward to February?
Early February, yeah,
Early February?
at the
Okay.
latest.
Let's
Yeah,
do
if
that.
I think the invoice was already paid, was it not? The Blackwell's invoice?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, that's a 2022 number. I'm talking about the next 5 years. It's a 5-year financial plan. And there's lots of things that are going to be in that CWRP that are going to need money.
oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay, well, let's have a meeting in February
February,
sometime.
Sure.
April, September, November.
So I just want to maybe take this time to say that I'm already feeling like I don't have enough time to get things done that need to be done. So, putting another sort of like requirement budget and this and that, now it's January. It's really not going to happen on a 15 hours a week, which is what I've given to run this program, which is actually a fairly complex program, with a lot of moving parts. So I just wanted to bring that up as a consideration when we're talking about planning and meetings and stuff like that.
I'm sympathetic to what I'm hearing from you. No question about that. And we did have this same discussion 6 or 7 years ago, whenever Jen was starting off. And we were looking for time and how to pay for it and all of that. I'd like to take the discussion offline and maybe have a discussion with Liam about how we can organize this, and yourself, Christie.
Okay.
So we can get this. I think we need to address this issue, but not in this meeting. I think it's an important thing to address, and how we, because I'm not up to date on how we fund your time, and I think I want to hear more about that, because we dealt with this about 5 years ago, and I think things have definitely changed, and there may be more work put on yourself, that we need to figure out how to fund the thing. So if we can take that offline, I would appreciate it. Liam, can I leave you to organize or to initiate something that we could have a conversation? I mean, it's pretty well a staff issue too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perennial issue that is not gonna go away anytime soon, so I think we just have to always keep checking in on it. So we can talk about it offline.
Yeah, and I can come
And
over.
Liam and Aaron are aware, this isn't the first that they've heard about this. It's just a matter of, I just wanted to, make sure that EPEC, because I am responsible to you, to EPEC, just so that you guys have clear understanding and expectations of what I can do with sort of like limited resources a little bit, yeah.
Yes, I'd like to have that conversation, and I'll come over and have that with yourself, Liam, and Aaron, and you, Christie, so how we organize this more properly to make it work for you.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay.
So February, October,
Sorry.
Say it again, February?
February, April, October.
Yeah, let's put that in.
February, April.
Yeah, that sounds okay. Are there any other business item 7.2?
No, but
No. Pardon?
I don't feel like we thoroughly went through the action items. Maybe I can go through and strike them out and just circulate them, and you guys can say if that was true or not true.
Let's do it that way.
I'm short on time.
Yeah.
And I saw some old ones in there that were from before Christie. And so I think at some point we should go through that list and see whether those action items should still be on there, because
Okay.
they've got
I looked
Jen's
at
name.
I looked at some of them and they had it done, so.
You and I can,
Yeah.
we'll do that. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's tear that thing apart and reorganize it
Yeah.
smaller. But that other stuff's on there that doesn't have to be on there.
Yeah.
Out of date. Seth, can you handle that in?
Yes.
Organizing that?
Mhm.
Thank you. Can I call for adjournment now? Could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Morse. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Thanks,